Sunday morning unfolded quietly in Portland, the kind of soft coastal morning Allison Hale usually treasured. Slow sunlight, a faint salt breeze, and the familiar rustle of pine outside her kitchen window. But the moment she opened her front door to find Brianna standing there, smiling a little too brightly and holding two identical porcelain mugs, something in Allison's chest tightened. The warmth on Brianna's face looked painted on, stretched into place like a performance she had rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Thought I'd bring you a treat," Brianna said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Her voice was syrupy, overly sweet for an early hour. "A special blend I found downtown. You'll love it." Allison studied her carefully. Brianna moved with deliberate precision, setting the mugs down on the counter as if she were presenting evidence. Her tone, her gestures, even the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, everything felt too controlled, too polished, as though she were trying to hide the strain beneath her elegance. Allison had seen the same tight composure in many defendants and witnesses over the years, especially those on the edge of panic. She approached the mugs slowly. The steam rising from them carried a smell that made her pause. Not the warm, earthy comfort of coffee beans. This was sharper, almost metallic, an odor that didn't belong in any drink she had ever encountered. A chemical bite lingered beneath the surface. "That's quite a blend," Allison murmured, lifting one mug close enough to inhale again. The smell unsettled her, though she kept her expression neutral. Brianna laughed lightly. "It's imported. Very exclusive." When Brianna turned toward the fridge, announcing she would grab some cream, her back angled just enough for Allison to make a decision. Her instincts, the ones honed through decades as a district prosecutor, tightened into a clear, cold warning. She never ignored that voice. Not once. The mugs were identical, positioned side by side. Without a sound, Allison swapped their positions. Brianna returned, set the cream on the table, and, almost too quickly, picked up the mug now meant for Allison. She lifted it with a pleased smile and took a long sip. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Allison saw it, the faint tightening around Brianna's jaw, the tiny grimace that flashed before she forced her expression smooth again. Brianna set the mug down with calculated ease, but she didn't sip again. Not once. Allison's heart remained steady, but her mind sharpened to a point. Every detail fell into place. The forced warmth, the chemical smell, the precise timing of Brianna's visit, the eagerness to hand her a drink already poured. A quiet current of tension rippled through the kitchen. Something was wrong. Deeply, dangerously wrong. Allison didn't know the full truth yet, but her instincts never lied. Something was off, and Brianna knew it too. The reaction came faster than Allison expected. 20 minutes after leaving her house, with the special coffee untouched in Allison's sink, Brianna suddenly clutched her throat in the passenger seat of Daniel's car. A violent cough tore out of her, sharp enough to shake her entire body. Red blotches bloomed across her neck, spreading in uneven patches like a rash rising from beneath the skin. Her breathing turned shallow and wheezing, as though her lungs were folding in on themselves. "Allison, what's happening to her?" Daniel shouted, already fumbling with the keys to start the car again. His panic came in waves, loud, scattered, unmoored. Allison didn't answer. She watched Brianna carefully, her mind working with the cold precision she no longer needed in court, but still carried everywhere. The symptoms were unmistakable. She had seen them before, on footage from old cases, in reports from toxicologists, in testimonies from ER doctors. This wasn't an allergic reaction, and it wasn't random. Daniel sped toward the interstate, heading for Boston General Hospital, white-knuckled and frantic. Brianna gasped for air beside him, one hand gripping her seatbelt so tightly her knuckles turned pale. The rash darkened. Her breathing sharpened into a desperate whine. Allison sat in the back seat, steady as a stone. She observed. She noted the timeline. She watched the patterns unfold. When they arrived at the ER entrance, nurses rushed Brianna inside, shouting vitals and symptoms as the sliding doors sealed behind them. Daniel followed in a frenzy, pacing circles around the waiting area, running both hands through his hair until it stood upright. Allison sat on a plastic chair, still, composed, and quietly tracking every detail. After almost an hour, Dr. Samuel Wright stepped out. "There's a synthetic compound in her blood," he said, his tone measured but serious. "We're stabilizing her, but she ingested something toxic. We're running confirmatory tests." Daniel's face drained of color. Allison stayed calm. A nurse approached a few minutes later. "She's awake." Inside the treatment room, Brianna sat upright, pale but alert. The moment she saw Allison, her expression hardened into something sharp, something rehearsed. Her hand rose, trembling but accusatory. "It was her," Brianna rasped, voice hoarse. "She poisoned me." Daniel froze. He didn't look at his mother. Not once. A quiet, dangerous silence settled over the room. Then a pair of footsteps approached, firm, confident, official. Detective Marcus Ellery of the Boston Police Major Crimes Unit stepped inside. Badge visible, notepad ready. "Mrs. Hale," he said, his voice clipped, formal, devoid of warmth. "I'll need to ask you some questions." Allison recognized the tone instantly. Cold. Procedural. It was the sound of a detective who already saw her not as a witness, but as a suspect. Detective Marcus Ellery led Allison down a quiet hallway in the ER, away from the chaotic noise of rushing nurses and ringing monitors. He guided her into a small consultation room with frosted glass walls and a metal table bolted to the floor. It wasn't an interrogation room, but it carried the same intention. Allison had used rooms like this herself, back when she was the one asking the questions. "Take a seat, Mrs. Hale," Ellery said, already pulling out his notepad. Allison lowered herself into the chair, folding her hands calmly in her lap. She didn't need time to gather her thoughts. Her memory, sharpened by decades in the prosecutor's office, was crisp and organized. She began with the facts. She described Brianna's unexpected visit that morning. The 2 identical porcelain mugs. The strange, chemical smell rising from the coffee. The moment Brianna turned to get cream from the refrigerator. The quiet swap she made. The grimace on Brianna's face after she drank. The timeline of symptoms. Every detail delivered with clarity and control. But as she spoke, Ellery's posture shifted. Subtle changes she recognized too well. His shoulders stiffened. His pen stopped for an instant. His eyes narrowed as he considered not just her words, but what he believed might hide between them. He began pressing harder. "How much did you drink? Why didn't you finish the coffee? Why would you switch the mugs if you didn't suspect something? If you suspected something, why didn't you call 911 immediately? Why did you allow Brianna to leave without warning anyone?" Each question carried an implication. Each implication pushed the weight closer onto her. Allison stayed composed, answering professionally, but she could feel the current shifting, pulling her further from witness and closer to suspect. It was the tone she used to hear when the prosecution began to lean a certain direction, when a narrative formed before the evidence was even settled. Ellery closed his notebook. "For now, Mrs. Hale, stay available. We may need to speak again." There was no warmth in his voice. No assurance, only procedure. When Allison returned home, dusk had settled over Portland, shadows stretching across her driveway. Her porch light flickered on automatically as she approached. That was when she saw it, a dark sedan parked half a block down, angled just enough toward her house to be unmistakable. An unmarked police vehicle. Watching. She didn't flinch. She only went inside, locked the door, and lowered the blinds. Hours passed. The house felt colder, heavier. Somewhere near midnight, her phone rang, an unfamiliar number flashing across the screen. "Mrs. Hale," a voice said, clipped and official. "Detectives will be at your residence in the morning with a search warrant. Please be available." The line went dead. Allison set the phone down, her expression steady even as the air thinned around her. The case was sliding in the wrong direction, and she knew exactly how dangerous that was. Allison didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, the same place where the 2 porcelain mugs had rested just hours earlier, and opened a fresh notebook. Her handwriting, steady, deliberate, filled page after page as she documented every moment from the morning to the ER interrogation. She recorded the smell of the coffee, the exact time Brianna grimaced, the timeline of the drive to Boston General, the questions Detective Ellery emphasized. This wasn't how a retired prosecutor usually spent a night. It was how a defendant prepared for the storm she knew was coming. But as she wrote, a loose thread tugged at the edge of her memory. Daniel had disappeared from the hospital. It struck her suddenly he had gone home. He told her it was to collect Brianna's insurance card and a change of clothes. Allison had accepted that explanation at the time, overwhelmed by the chaos unfolding around them. Now, with the cold clarity of midnight, his story no longer aligned with the timeline she had lived through. She turned toward the hallway, where her home's security hub blinked softly. The Ring doorbell stored all motion-triggered footage. Allison accessed the app, scrolling through the clips until she reached the window of time Daniel claimed he had been home. Her breath stopped. At 2:43 p.m., Daniel walked up her front steps. He used his spare key, one she had given him years ago for emergencies, and entered the house. Allison watched the footage closely. Daniel didn't leave after a few minutes. He stayed. A long time. He moved from room to room, disappearing into the hallway toward her bedroom, then reappearing near her study. His motions were purposeful, not frantic. Not a man grabbing personal items for a medical emergency. He stayed for over an hour. At 3:58 p.m., he exited, not through the front door, but through the back, glancing over his shoulder before stepping off the porch. Allison replayed the clip again, then again, until her vision blurred. Daniel had lied to her, and more importantly, there had been ample time to plant whatever Brianna needed the police to find. The realization settled on her like a heavy, suffocating weight. This wasn't just Brianna's scheme. Her son was involved. Willingly, knowingly, Allison closed her eyes for a moment, not to rest, but to steady the grief that threatened to rise. Then she reached for her phone. She didn't have many people left she trusted, but one name remained at the top of that very short list. She dialed Thomas Ridley, a retired federal investigator, older than she was, sharper than most men half his age. He answered on the third ring. "Allison." "It's happening," she said quietly, "and I need your help." Thomas didn't ask her to explain. He simply said, "I'll be there by morning." Before sunrise, the street outside Allison's home was still and blue, the kind of quiet that could fool someone into believing the world was safe. But the unmarked police car parked down the block hadn't moved all night, its silhouette watching her through the dim morning haze. Allison stood at her back door, coat zipped, a small canvas bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't hesitate. The moment the patrolman inside lit a cigarette and glanced at his phone, she slipped out through the yard, moving silently across the damp grass toward the narrow alley that cut behind the neighboring homes. She made it to the bus stop 2 streets over without being seen. From there, she boarded a local bus to the Portland station, then a regional train heading northwest. With each mile that pulled her farther from the city, the knot in her chest loosened just enough for her to breathe. She didn't look out the window. She didn't check her phone. She simply replayed the camera footage in her mind, The way Daniel had moved, the calculated steps, the quiet exit through her back door. The betrayal was still fresh, still sharp. By midday, the train reached Bethel, Maine, a quiet town surrounded by dense forest and rolling foothills. Thomas Ridley's cabin sat a mile beyond the station, tucked beneath tall pines that creaked softly in the wind. When Allison knocked, Thomas opened the door immediately, as if he'd been waiting right behind it. He didn't ask why she had come. He only said, "Sit. Start from the beginning." Over steaming mugs of plain black coffee that smelled exactly like it should, Allison told him everything. The visit, the strange smell, the mug swap, the hospital, Detective Ellery's questioning, the ring footage, Daniel's lie. Thomas listened with a stillness that only decades of investigative work could teach, his eyes narrowing at certain details, his jaw tightening at others. "Show me the footage," he said. She handed him her phone. He watched the full hour of Daniel inside her house, rewinding key moments, studying his posture, the direction of his steps. When the clip ended, Thomas set the phone down with a quiet, grim certainty. "Your daughter-in-law isn't just lying," he said. "She's done this before." He turned to his old laptop, powered it on, and began working with a speed and steadiness that reminded Allison why she had always trusted him. He accessed public records, federal databases, archived marriage licenses, probate filings. Then he made several calls, quiet, coded conversations with former colleagues who still owed him favors. Within an hour, a chilling trail emerged. No tax history under the name Brianna Cole. No medical records older than 3 years. No residency documentation beyond basic utilities. And 2 previous marriages, both to significantly older, wealthy men. Both men had died suddenly. Both estates had transferred entirely to their young widow. Both deaths had been ruled unexpected cardiac events. A pattern unmistakable. A predator with a method. Thomas leaned back in his chair, expression hardening. "She's done this before, Allison," he said quietly. "And your son, he's part of it now." Thomas closed his laptop and rubbed a hand across his jaw, his expression shifting into the hard, analytical focus Allison remembered from his federal days. Outside, the wind moved through the pines in a slow, restless sweep. Inside, the air felt heavier, thick with the gravity of what they now knew. "Allison," he said quietly, "evidence like this, patterns, records, suspicious deaths, it all matters. But none of it is enough to pull the investigation off you." He met her eyes. "Right now, the police only see the toxicology report, the coffee, and Brianna's accusation. As long as that's the case, you're their primary suspect." Allison nodded, though she already understood. She'd taught younger prosecutors this exact principle for years. Circumstantial evidence could shift suspicion, but it didn't break a case open. "What do we need?" she asked. "First-hand proof," Thomas replied. "Audio, video, something that shows Brianna and Daniel conspiring, discussing their plan, acknowledging the poison. If we get that, everything changes. The arrest warrants flip. The narrative flips. You go from suspect to target of an attempted killing." He leaned back slightly, voice steady and methodical. "The law is clear. Recorded conversations are admissible in Maine as long as one party consents. If you're the one recording, it's legal." Allison felt the words settle like ice inside her. "You're saying I have to confront them." Thomas didn't soften it. "You need to get close enough to hear the truth from Daniel. Preferably both of them, but Daniel will crack before she does. It has to come out of his mouth." Allison's pulse tightened, not with fear, but with resolve. The betrayal still cut deep, but beneath the wound was something harder, colder, a need to know why her own son had stepped across a line she once believed he was incapable of crossing. "What if he won't talk?" she asked. Thomas slid a small digital recorder across the table, followed by a burner phone with a clean SIM card. Both objects looked deceptively ordinary. "People talk to the person they're trying to manipulate or guilt," he said. "You're still his mother, Allison. He'll say something. He'll want to justify himself. He'll want you to understand his side. That's all we need." She stared at the recorder, the weight of it far heavier than its size. This wasn't just evidence gathering. It was stepping into a conversation that might break whatever small piece of motherhood she still carried. But the alternative was worse. If she stayed quiet, they would frame her. If she trusted the investigation to correct course, she'd be in handcuffs by Friday. If she did nothing, Brianna would walk free and do it again to someone else. Allison straightened her shoulders. "I'm going back," she said. Thomas didn't try to dissuade her. "You won't stay long. Get what you need, get out, and come straight back here. Call me the moment you have anything." Allison tucked the recorder and burner phone into her coat pocket. Her hands didn't shake. She needed to hear it from Daniel's mouth, even if his words shattered whatever remained between them. Night had settled over Portland by the time Allison reached her son's neighborhood. The quiet suburban street washed in pale yellow from scattered porch lights. She parked 2 blocks away, locking the burner phone and recorder inside her coat. Every footstep felt amplified in the still air as she cut through a row of backyards, guided only by memory and instinct. Daniel and Brianna's house sat on a corner lot, the kitchen light glowing faintly through the blinds. Allison circled along the fence line until she found the darker stretch behind the hydrangeas, dense enough to hide her as she crouched beneath the kitchen window. Her breath formed a thin cloud in the cold night air. She pressed the recorder against her chest and lifted it just enough to catch the voices spilling through the glass. Brianna spoke first, her tone sharp and triumphant. "We're almost there. The police think she did it." Allison's stomach turned. Daniel's reply came low, strained. "I didn't think it would go this far, Mom." She looked terrified. "But not dead," Brianna snapped. "And that's the problem. She's still in the way. Once she's gone, everything transfers cleanly. You get your share, and we can finally move out of this dump and start over." Allison's fingers tightened around the recorder. Daniel didn't deny his involvement. He didn't say he'd been tricked. He didn't say he wanted to stop. Instead, his voice trembled with guilt, not innocence. I didn't mean for everything to fall on her. The cops are suspicious. Ellery keeps asking about timelines." Brianna scoffed. "Which is why we follow the plan. She shows up here, I shoot, and I claim self-defense. A grieving daughter-in-law protecting herself from a violent woman who already tried to poison me? They'll eat it up." The words hit Allison like a physical blow. Brianna's confidence, her callousness, the calm way she described killing her. A moment of silence followed, brief but heavy, before Brianna's voice suddenly sharpened. "Did you see that?" Allison froze. Something in the yard had betrayed her. Maybe a shifting shadow, maybe the faint crunch of leaves beneath her shoe. Brianna moved quickly inside the kitchen. Cabinet doors opened. Metal clattered. When she returned to the window, she was armed. A gun. "She's out there," Brianna hissed. "I swear, I saw movement." The back door swung open. Brianna stepped into the yard, weapon raised, scanning the darkness with predatory precision. Daniel followed, agitated and whispering her name in a frantic attempt to slow her down. Allison pressed herself against the side of the shed, barely daring to breathe. Brianna's footsteps came closer, crunching through the frost-coated grass. A single step separated them. Then a dog barked from 2 houses over. Brianna's head snapped toward the noise, giving Allison the split second she needed. She slipped along the fence line, eased open a neighbor's gate, and disappeared into the next yard. Moving quickly but silently, she circled back to the street, her pulse hammering as she reached her car. She didn't stop shaking until she was halfway to Bethel. When she finally stepped through Thomas Ridley's door, breathless and pale. She held up the recorder with a trembling hand. "I got it," she whispered. "Alive. Barely, but with the truth preserved." The next morning, Thomas drove while Allison sat quietly beside him, the recorder and printed documents stacked neatly inside a manila folder on her lap. The early Boston traffic pulsed around them, but Allison barely registered the noise. Her mind replayed the night before, the cold yard, Brianna's gun, Daniel's voice cracking under guilt. The evidence she carried felt heavier than its physical weight, as if it contained her entire past and whatever future she might have left. Thomas parked outside the Boston police headquarters, the building's glass facade catching the pale morning light. He placed a steadying hand on her arm before they stepped inside. "You did everything right," he said. "Now let me handle the structure. You speak when it matters." Inside the Major Crimes Unit, Detective Marcus Ellery looked up with a guarded expression as they entered. He hadn't expected her to return voluntarily, let alone accompanied by a retired federal investigator. A woman joined him at the conference table, placing a stack of files beside her. Her presence was unmistakable. Confident posture, crisp suit, sharp eyes. "Mrs. Hale," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Assistant District Attorney Olivia Grant. Detective Ellery asked me to consult on the case. Please sit." Allison took her seat. Thomas remained standing, setting the folder on the table before easing it open. "We have new evidence," he said. "Direct evidence. And it's going to change the direction of this investigation." Ellery looked skeptical until Thomas pressed play on the recorder. Brianna's voice filled the room first. "We're almost there. The police think she did it." Then Daniel, "I didn't think it would go this far." And finally Brianna's chilling declaration. "She shows up here. I shoot and claim self-defense." The room fell silent. ADA Grant leaned forward, face tightening as the recording continued. Ellery's pen slipped from his fingers. Neither interrupted, neither breathed loudly. They simply listened as the truth unfolded with brutal clarity. When the recording ended, Thomas slid the next items across the table. Ring footage showing Daniel entering Allison's home for over an hour. Records proving Brianna's identity trail was fabricated. Marriage and probate documents tying her to 2 previous suspicious deaths. Comparison charts, timelines, corroborated addresses, and flagged inconsistencies. "This isn't attempted poison by Allison Hale," Thomas said calmly. "This is a serial predator constructing her 3rd financial kill and using your investigation to cover it." Ellery sat back, the weight of realization settling across his expression. ADA Grant exhaled slowly, already flipping through the documentation with a prosecutor's mind firing on all cylinders. "Mrs. Hale," she said finally, "you are no longer considered a suspect. As of this moment, you are a protected witness and the victim of an attempted homicide." Allison closed her eyes briefly, not in relief, but in quiet acknowledgement of the cost. Grant continued, voice firm. "Detective Ellery, draft the emergency warrants. We're bringing them both in." Ellery stood immediately. Within minutes, the entire direction of the case had flipped. Brianna and Daniel were now the primary suspects. Arrest warrants were being typed, printed, and signed. Units were dispatched. The storm that had been gathering over Allison was no longer following her. It was turning toward the people who created it. The arrests began before noon. A Portland patrol unit, accompanied by 2 detectives from Boston, arrived at Daniel and Brianna's home with the emergency warrant in hand. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as officers approached the front door, weapons holstered but ready. Daniel opened it halfway, confusion flickering across his face before recognition and fear set in. "Daniel Hale," one detective announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit attempted murder and evidence tampering." Daniel didn't resist. His shoulders sagged as if something inside him had already cracked. The officers cuffed him and guided him down the porch steps. He didn't look back at the house. He didn't ask for Brianna. He didn't ask for his mother. Across the city, Brianna was nowhere to be found. Within an hour, statewide alerts were issued. Officers checked bus terminals, rental car counters, train stations. Finally, a highway patrol unit spotted a car matching hers parked outside a roadside motel off I-95. Backup arrived quickly. When they entered the room, Brianna tried to run. She made it 2 steps before officers pinned her against the wall. Spread across the motel bed were the tools of her next escape: a short, blonde wig, 3 fake IDs under different names, a duffel bag stuffed with cash, a burner phone, and, most disturbing, a printed profile of an elderly widower who lived alone in Bangor. Notes lined the margins, detailing his assets, medical issues, and daily schedule. It wasn't just evidence of flight. It was evidence of her next target. Brianna's arrest was swift, but she never dropped the performance. She sobbed, insisted it was a misunderstanding, claimed she was being hunted by dangerous people, accused police of abusing her rights. None of it landed. Back in Boston, the interrogations began. Daniel crumbled first. In the stark interview room, under the cold fluorescent lights, he sat hunched over the table, hands shaking. Detective Ellery watched in silence as the truth finally bled out of him. She told me it was all set, he stammered. She said Mom was going to die anyway. I didn't poison her, I didn't. But she told me to put things in Mom's house, just to help the investigation lean in the right direction. She said it was harmless. Ellery didn't respond. Daniel swallowed hard. Tears streaked down his face. I didn't want to hurt Mom. I believed Brianna. I thought she loved me. He admitted to planting supplements, receipts, and a half-empty medication bottle in Allison's home. Items designed to imply motive and opportunity. But even in confession, he clung to one thread. It was all her idea. Brianna planned everything. Across the hallway, Brianna sat in a separate room, posture perfect, expression composed, like a woman on a televised interview rather than a homicide suspect. No matter how carefully Ellery questioned her, her facade didn't crack. I'm the victim, she repeated calmly. Allison tried to kill me. Daniel is confused. You're all confused. She denied everything. Denied the pattern. Denied the recording. Denied reality itself. But as the hours passed, one thing became unmistakably clear. Their stories, once tightly woven, were collapsing from every angle. And the truth was no longer something either of them could outrun. Suffolk County Superior Court stood tall and austere against the Boston skyline, a place Allison had walked into countless times as a prosecutor, never as a victim. The oak-paneled courtroom felt colder than she remembered, the air dense with whispered tension as spectators, reporters, and families filled the benches. Allison sat in the witness area, hands folded, her posture composed even as her heart beat with a quiet, steady ache. The trial began with the state calling her to the stand. Allison Hale, ADA Olivia Grant said, guiding her gently through the testimony. Can you describe what happened on the morning of April 2nd? Allison spoke slowly, carefully, every word anchored in truth. She described the coffee, the chemical smell, the mug swap, Brianna's grimace, the hospital, the accusation, the police presence outside her home, and finally, her escape to Bethel. The courtroom listened in absolute silence. Despite her calm tone, fragments of hurt broke through, memories of Daniel's lies, Brianna's threats, and the night she hid behind a shed with a gun inches away. She did not cry. She did not tremble. But she carried the weight of a mother telling the world her son had tried to help kill her. Next came the prosecution's evidence. First, the toxicology reports. detailing the synthetic compound in Brianna's bloodstream. Second, the audio recordings, played through the courtroom speakers. Brianna's voice chilling every person present. We're almost there. The police think she did it. She shows up here. I shoot and claim self-defense. Daniel's shaky replies followed, layered with guilt and complicity. Third, the Ring camera footage showing Daniel's hour-long entry into Allison's home, the linchpin proving planted evidence. Finally, the documents from Brianna's previous marriages. Photos, death certificates, probate transfers. 2 older husbands dead under unexpected cardiac events. 2 estates emptied within days. 2 quiet cases that now echoed into this courtroom. When Brianna took the stand, her poise cracked for the first time. "She's lying," she said, pointing at Allison. "Daniel planned all of this. He's unstable. He's dangerous. He was obsessed with his mother's money." Her voice rose, her composure slipping with every sentence. Daniel, brought in from holding, watched her, jaw clenched, eyes hollow. During his testimony, he broke again. "I loved her," he whispered, looking at Brianna. "I believed every word she said. She told me Mom was rich, that she would never give us anything. She said the only way to start our life was if Mom wasn't in the picture." He swallowed, voice cracking. "I helped plant the evidence, but she planned everything." Judge Leonard Bridges listened without interruption. His expression remained measured, but his eyes betrayed nothing. No sympathy, no frustration. Only a man weighing 2 lives against the truth presented. When closing arguments ended, he delivered the verdict calmly, decisively. For Brianna Cole, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Brianna's face drained of color. For Daniel Hale, 20 years, with eligibility for parole based on cooperation and demonstrated remorse. Daniel bowed his head, shoulders collapsing inward. Allison didn't watch Brianna being led away. She didn't watch Daniel being handcuffed and escorted out another door. She felt no triumph, no vengeance, only a quiet release, as if a long, painful exhale had finally left her body after months of holding her breath. When the courtroom doors finally closed behind her, Allison stepped into a world that felt unfamiliar. The spring air in Boston carried a faint salt breeze from the harbor, but she barely felt it. Freedom, after months of fear and accusation, came with an unexpected hollowness. She drove back to Portland alone, the road winding through quiet stretches of pine and coastline. The house she returned to was the same porch, same windows, same creaking step by the kitchen doorway, but it felt altered, as if the walls carried echoes of everything she had survived. For the first few days, reporters lingered at the end of her driveway, hoping for a quote, a photograph, a soundbite from the woman nearly framed for killing her own daughter-in-law. But their interest faded quickly. The story shifted to Brianna's criminal profile, the prior husbands, the pattern, the sentencing. The world moved on. Her neighbors did not. Some waved from a distance. Some avoided eye contact altogether. A few brought flowers, unsure how to express sympathy for something so complicated. But none stepped past her front door. Inside, her house felt too quiet. A weight hung in the air, not the fear of being hunted anymore, but the grief of losing Daniel. Not the boy she raised, nor even the man he became, but the version of him she thought she still knew. She felt that loss more sharply than any danger she had escaped. 3 weeks after the trial, the first letter arrived, then a second, then a third. Daniel's handwriting, familiar yet shaky, filled the envelopes with apologies she wasn't ready to read but couldn't bring herself to throw away. Each letter revealed a different tone, remorse in one, defensiveness in the next, a plea for forgiveness in the last. She read them all, once each, without replying. Some wounds needed time before they could even be acknowledged. Thomas visited without ceremony, knocking lightly before letting himself in. He didn't ask how she was feeling. He didn't pry or offer unsolicited speeches about healing. Instead, he replaced a loose shelf in her pantry, fixed the back door hinge, and brought over a casserole when he suspected she hadn't eaten much that day. Sometimes they ate together in silence. Sometimes he simply sat at the table while she watered her plants or sorted old mail. His presence was steady, grounding. Gradually, small routines returned. She woke with the sun again, not with the jolt of nightmare. She brewed her own coffee, simple, safe, familiar. She walked the neighborhood in the early evenings, letting the cold air clear her thoughts. She tended her small herb garden, fingers brushing rosemary and sage she once neglected during the investigation. Each day, she reclaimed a little more of herself. Freedom, she learned, didn't arrive all at once. It came in quiet moments, steady, fragile, and profoundly human. 6 months later, summer settled over Bethel with a gentle warmth that pressed softly against the pine-covered hills. The sunlight filtered through the trees in slow-moving golden bands, and Allison found herself drawn to Thomas's cabin more than her own home in Portland. What began as a refuge had become something steadier, a place where silence didn't echo with fear, but with possibility. She spent her mornings outside, hands deep in soil as she tended the vegetable garden Thomas had once neglected. Tomatoes, basil, and early squash sprouted beneath her careful touch. The simple act of nurturing something that asked for nothing but sunlight and patience, helped rebuild the parts of her that had been fractured. She woke without dread now, stepping onto the porch with a steaming mug of coffee, greeting the day before it could overwhelm her. Her afternoons unfolded at an unhurried pace. She walked the winding trails behind the cabin, the soft earth damp beneath her boots, the scent of pine and wildflowers thick in the air. Sometimes Thomas joined her, offering quiet companionship without expectation. Other times, she walked alone, letting the steady rhythm of her footsteps anchor her to the present. On weekends, a few former colleagues visited, not to discuss the case, not anymore, but to share stories about new hobbies, a grandchild's first steps, or a recent book they loved. The conversations felt ordinary in a way that was almost startling. For the first time in a long time, the world seemed broader than a courtroom, broader than betrayal, broader than survival. Allison no longer felt hunted. The tension that once lived in her shoulders had eased, replaced with something softer, human again. Grounded in a life, she was rebuilding piece by steady piece. Word of her experience, though carefully guarded, reached the local high school. When a teacher asked if she would speak to a group of students about truth, manipulation, and personal agency, she hesitated only briefly. Standing before a classroom of teenagers, she shared, not the sensational details, not the darkest moments, but the lessons she wished someone had told her younger self. That instincts matter, that manipulation hides behind charm, and that trusting one's own voice can be the difference between life and danger. The students listened with a kind of solemn respect that surprised her. A few stayed after, asking quiet, earnest questions. It was the first time since the trial she felt her past could help someone other than herself. As summer deepened, the cabin grew brighter, fuller. Flowers opened along the fence line. Thomas repaired the porch swing and placed a soft cushion on it, claiming it was for when you're ready to sit and listen to the wind. She began sleeping through the night, not every night, but more often than not. One late afternoon, she baked a cherry pie, the same recipe her mother taught her decades ago. The scent filled the small kitchen, warm and sweet. When it cooled, she placed it on the counter, opened the window, and let the mountain air drift through the room. She stood there quietly, eyes closed, breathing deeply. Life could go on, slowly, quietly, but fully hers.